Possessors is the fourth title coming from the indie developers known as Heart Machine, with their first three titles being the groundbreaking and critically acclaimed Hyperlight Drifter, which we did a review on, link within the description. Their debut outing into the three-dimensional action and exploration title was Solar Ash, which we also did a review for, link within the description below as well. And their follow-up to Hyperlight Drifter entitled Hyperlight Breaker. Classified as an action roguelite, which at the time of this review is still within its early access awaiting its 1.0 release. We are hoping and praying that it becomes a full finished product and be released one day. Considering what is currently taking place, we hope that it will pull through regardless of the circumstances. Luckily we got Possessors, which is very unique because this is the first time Heart Machine would try their hand at what would fit the bill as a Metroidvania. Another reason why this game would be different is due to the fact that the entity that would be publishing this title is none other than Devolver Digital. This publisher is responsible for giving us awesome titles such as Number Studios' Gris and Neva, Dodge Singapore games Into the Gungeon and its sequels, the Serious Sam and Shadow Warriors franchise, Crow Team's The Talos Principle 1 and 2, and some of our favorite games like Carry On, Mother Russia Bleeds, Cult of the Lamb, Death's Door, even a game that we've been watching very closely called Skate Story. These games are just a sample size of the titles that they actually have up under their belt. They have so much more, and I will include the links to their official website so you can check out the titles for yourself. But to see Heart Machine partnering up with Devolver Digital is something we never saw coming, or could really even imagine. But today we're rocking out with the PlayStation version, so let's get into it. The story of Possessors takes place within the year of 1992 in a fictional city known as Sanzu. It is here where this kid named Luca is seen trying to escape this facility with her friend named Kaz. The name of this facility is called Agrodime. It is a huge company that practically funds and is the main economic supply of this city. It specializes in producing and supplying electrical energy to the denizens of Sanzu. However, the agenda and how they are able to accomplish and mass produce such is way more nefarious than what its public perception would try to uphold. So one day this huge explosion takes place which releases what one may be safe to say are demons. These monstrosities go on a rampage, destroying and taking the lives of many, with Kaz himself unfortunately becoming a casualty in the midst of this apocalyptic event. For those who was able to escape the city, they were the lucky ones. And if the people that were left behind weren't destroyed, they became what is the name of this game entail, by becoming possessed by the demons themselves. But humans weren't the only thing that became possessed. Everyday items, machines, and other inanimate objects became possessed by these demons as well, and began to take on a life of its own. Shortly after the explosion while Kaz and Luca were attempting to escape, Kaz, as I said, bites the dust, while Luca is seen not being too far from the status of her friend, seeing as though her legs became crushed under the heavy debris. Her injury was so severe that she was practically knocking on death's door. What ends up saving her life is the chance encounter with Rem, a demon who was also down for the count. To stop what could have been a grim fate for the both of them, Luca enters into a covenant or pact with Rem on the grounds that Luca must help Rem, and in return, Luca will be granted legs and thus pretty much stay alive. Throughout this journey that they will share together, both will come to know each other's past, way of life, and motives, which led to their meeting. In doing so, both will discover that even though they come from different planes of existence, they both share common experiences that they can relate to. It's through the character development of both that each of them will inevitably come to better understand each other. Places where Luca grow up that has become a living nightmare of her former self, and lastly find out more about Agrodime's history to see if Rem can be able to return home. Possessors has this gloomy and yet saturated presentation given the type of colors being utilized and this seemingly classic retro CRT television filter which this game drowns in. You can even see the horizontal lines faded across the screen. This game presents to the player its characters being within a seemingly two-dimensional hand-drawn art style with the background having this three-dimensional realism to it. This looks very nice, but oftentimes it can throw the player off to a degree that if you're not keen on paying attention to detail, you can become quite confused. Let me talk about the character designs. The main character you play as, Luca, Rem, and other characters you come across look alright and somewhat plain to a degree, but where their representation shines is when the dialogue boxes show up during their conversations. Here, the details shown can make them appear a little bit more memorable. For example, how Rem always looks like he's modeling for a Vogue magazine cover. and thanks to the many still images illustrated, we can see the changes in their emotions to give more emotional cues, rather than just having one still image where the player has to guess how they are feeling. Speaking of that, Possessors does not have no voice acting, so yeah, it's pretty much reading. Also, this game doesn't have any cutscenes to a degree of cinematics, but instead presents a series of still images. The monsters and enemies within Possessors do convey what type of item the demons have taken control of, such as traffic cones, old computers with too much wiring and mouses attached to them, teddy bears, file cabinets, and even vending machines that dish out drinks that can do some serious damage. The player may take notice that a variety among some of the enemies only differ in color and sizes, but is essentially the same design. And again, the way that this game is presented within its utilization of 2D and 3D combination of environments and character designs is something that can be appreciated. The thematic and meticulous objects that separate some of the territories from each other, like the aquarium, mall, and other areas, are noticeable to a degree. However, for some areas and zones, they can come off as appearing a little bit, or at least feeling a little bit too samey. And lastly, while we're on the environments, with the exception of maybe like 2 zones in my personal opinion, Possessors has done a masterful job at pretty much knocking this out of the park as far as giving us the feeling of being isolated and by yourself. But as the player, it can make the game feel a tad bit dead while hoping for something to be shown to somehow fill in the void. Luca doesn't really come across many life forms that doesn't want to take her out. What I mean by this is that the interaction of other NPCs are too far in between. The population of Sanzu City does feel like it's in the lower half of the teens. I would say that coming up on the second half of the game is where you'll find others to have some dialogue with. And another thing, we always loved it when we saw these bright neon colors like what you can find within the save area, the way these monoliths glow before you get new abilities, and even when we see the after images of Luca whenever she dashes. To us, we really do like these colors because it pretty much just pops out. Some of us believe that neon colors is just Heart Machine's calling card, but with their previous titles out, how could you blame us? Possessors is, as I stated before, a Metroidvania by definition, meaning you as the player will explore sections of a larger interconnected world that will have the character making new discoveries and obtaining items, to only then backtrack to previous areas to gain access to new places that was prohibited before. All of that is in here. Throw in there some combat, puzzle solving, and choice dialogue, and you will have the skeleton of what makes up Possessors. But just like any food dish, the basic fundamentals may be present, but it's that unique ingredient or method that solidifies its authenticity. But before I get too deep within that, let me talk about the mechanics, beginning with the methods of traversal. So when taking control of Luca, the player has the ability to move left and right, jump, slide down vertical surfaces, grab hold to ledges, and dash from the moment that you begin your journey. As the story progresses, more abilities will be granted to you to gain access to other sectors as well, most of which will come via these strange monoliths. Before long, you will find yourself swinging, sliding to get to and fro. Fortunately, throughout Possessors, you'll come across these underground subway entrances that will give the player the ability to fast travel across far distances. This will certainly help assist Luca in not having to backtrack and do a long pilgrimage to areas located on the other side of the map. Speaking of maps, the player will have a map which will display your exact location and will conveniently have these markers to show places of importance to get to. Most notably, these eyes that you have to get. You see where you need to go, now get to them, which majority of that progress won't be felt until like the second half of the game. Meanwhile, you'll be meeting people who will be the reason for initiating side quests. The next element of Possessors that I want to talk about is the combat. Luca will start off with knives as the primary weapon, which she delivers a flurry of melee attacks. For defensive measures, Luca has the ability to do this sidestep maneuver for dodging attacks, and once acquired, you'll be able to get this ability to parry attacks and deflect incoming projectiles from enemies. Now if you look up at the top of the screen, you will see your health bar. Below that, you'll see these circles, and below that, number of healing items that you can use to replenish your health. But back to these 3 circles. These are basically the number of times that you can do these special attacks and can be replenished when you land normal attacks on opponents. Special attacks come from having certain weapons equipped. These weapons are just everyday items like a computer mouse, baseball, and other things. If you take a look at them in your options menu, you'll see these slots. These slots are made of things called afflicts, which grants passive attributes and buffs to your characters like increasing the damage of attacks, health regeneration, and other benefits. You'll be able to find more afflicts and items like things to help increase your healing items and other stuff throughout your map, often hidden in hard to reach or hidden areas, so it will be quite helpful for the player to be observant and perceptive of your surroundings. Luckily on your map, you can set a marker just to keep in mind important places to return to later. You can increase the slots to install more afflicts to weapons, items, and upgrade Luca via these merchants that you will run across in almost every important sector of Sanzu. But you can't get nothing without having chroma to buy it. Chroma is the currency that you get from destroying monsters. It's kind of like your money. However, be mindful that if you are defeated and your health is depleted, you are brought back to this area, which is kind of like your save hub, with your chroma that you have accumulated lost. But in order to get it all back, you have to go back to where you were defeated in order to get it. Another thing to take note of is that the enemies aren't the only thing that the player could fall victim to. The only other situation stems from not being able to obtain enough oxygen fast enough whenever you're submerged underwater. If you don't want to risk losing all your chroma like this often, you can deposit it at your save hub to withdraw it later. One last thing that I can say about these save hubs is that whenever you walk by it, the game auto-saves, and whenever you go into it, your health is recovered along with all of your hidden items. But when you exit, all of the enemies that you have defeated before will all respawn anew as well. Speaking of enemies, there are a few types, most of which that the player will become very familiar with. You'll have some monsters that are airborne, and of course some that are grounded. All of them, for the most part, telegraph when they're about to attack you by making some type of noise. So make sure you keep that finger on that parry button ready. And to be honest, once you've seen them once, you will see them throughout the game. Most Metroidvanias has this somewhat unspoken expectation that once a player enters into a new section of the map, they would experience new enemies that may be exclusive or has an increased presence exclusive to that new area. However, Possessors doesn't necessarily believe within this expectation, given the limited types of enemies that will be pretty much popping up damn near every area. When it comes to the combat, we enjoyed what Possessors brought. We found ourselves stringing combos together, mostly with the whip and the computer mouse. As far as the weapons go, the knives will land hits much more faster. However, if you use the bat and other weapons, it will knock your enemies backwards. There are a few things that we did notice while fighting, and that is 1, the player has to be very mindful of the direction Luca is facing before attacking. Once she attacks, it's only after a certain frame where she can then turn around. The level of fluidity that the player may be accustomed to in other games may not necessarily be present within Possessors, and we understand that this can be a challenge, but overall, as far as how this game goes, it's kinda fair. Well, the only unfair thing that we sometimes felt while playing Possessors was during the times that we felt like we was being ganged up on. There were quite a number of moments where we had a whole bunch of enemies coming after us, and they would do this attack where they was kind of like stun us or knock us back. And if there was like other enemies that was around, man, they would take these cheap shots like it was no tomorrow. But overall, the gameplay is good, and it does exactly what it sets out to do. The sound design of Possessors is one of the aspects about this game that is noticeably godlike. When you attack an opponent, the type of weapon that you're using has an impact and sound that is different amongst each of the weapons that you have. You can hear the metal of the knives when slashing, the brunt of the bat, and this loud distorted white noise coming from the guitar before it brings calamity down on its foes. The noise of creatures sound otherworldly, and even before when battles begin, the sound of how creatures materialize sound like a boom tube being utilized. And if you're a DC Comics fan, you know what I'm talking about. Also, whenever you're underwater, it seems like the sound gets drowned out up under a filter. And lastly, which is our favorite, is how the player gets this whip ability. Every time you use it, it sounds like a lightning strike. Even the environmental sounds are awesome. The sound of water sounds nice and crisp. And we can recall when we enter this area where we can hear the wails and cries of people who are, well, we can probably assume are victims of various horrendous circumstances. But overall, the sound design is quite good. No complaints here. The music of Possessors was done by the music composer and sound designer Joel Corlitz, who has done works for other titles such as Solar Ash, Mortal Kombat 1, Halo Infinite, and even a game we reviewed called The Memoir Blue. Shameless plug, if you want to check out what we had to say about that game, the link will be in the description below. Mr. Corlitz isn't the only one who contributed his works to the Possessors original soundtrack though. The second and only other person is this very eclectic musician known as Azuria Sky. She has a number of projects that she produced and released. Actually, it was Azuria's voice that serves as an introduction, giving her quiet and somewhat haunting performance on the song that bears the same name as the game. This was the song that began to play when I first booted up Possessors during the main menu. While listening to this OST, tracks like Berserk Executive and Sightless All-Star moves away from this heavy piano-based structure found in a lot of the songs and instead gives us an up-tempo dark electronic bass composition, which we found to help diversify the styles of the songs that we keep hearing on this soundtrack. One of our favorite tracks include this haunting and depressing slow piano ballad on this song called Campus Hill Forum, which reminded us of an artist by the name of Miguel Baptista Benedict. Then we have this song called Mall Essence, which out of all of the tracks is very unique in our book because it gives us this smooth and soothing jazz number with the saxophone coming in ever so elegantly. And lastly, one of our other favorite tracks is called Yes Please, and it plays every time a merchant is somewhere in the area. If you hear this funky tune play, look and be prepared to spend some chroma. Overall, the Possessors original soundtrack gives a perfect atmosphere and serves as a nice backdrop to the already unfortunate situation that Luca finds herself in. I will include links where you can hear the original soundtrack for yourself. Links will be in the description below. Possessors, just like Hyperlight Drifter and Solar Ash for Studio Heart Machine, is somewhat of an ambitious step into new territory when it comes to art style, presentation, and even game genre. How one would describe Possessors is a Metroidvania that checks off the obligatory ingredients and requirements needed to be defined as such. The gameplay works and isn't too deep. Finding different weapons, discovering new areas was always exciting, and progressing the story forward, although somewhat predictable at times, is what remained as a motivation to proceed further. The boss battles were awesome and the highlights, but overall, Possessors was enjoyable to play. Some of the topics that Possessors speaks on is what can be considered good and evil, the dangers of being willfully ignorant out of the sake of optimism, more notably in regards to subjecting oneself to a potential abusive relationship or connection to another. We even have situations when the subject of classism begins to play a part in the upbringing of both Luca and Rem. The writing of Possessors is really good. Character development, depth, and growth is on full display, and when learning about the past of each, we get a clear understanding of why they behave the way they do, making these characters a little bit more complex than what you would initially think. Overall, Possessors is a good game. Its fundamental concept is well established as its base of a game, but we kinda wanted it to be fleshed out just a little bit more. But if you want to check out Possessors for yourself, go ahead. Possessors is now available for PlayStation 5 and Steam for PC for a little less than $20. I'll provide links in the description below so you can go ahead and check it out for yourself. And with the amount of content that you get for this price, I would definitely check this one out. And until next time, peace y'all.
And don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit up that notification bell, and I gotta go.